What's up, guys? This is Heis, and welcome back to Stories from the Shop, our series in which we talk about all manner of railroad stories, typically in the mechanical locomotive facility, whether it be at the museum, Sound Transit, or at the BNSF. And today's story is from the latter, and it's my worst day on the railroad. Not the shittiest day, we've covered that one before. The worst day. I got reminded of this story because I was thinking of memories of one of my former machinists who sadly passed away. I got a text saying, "Hey, did you hear about this?" And it was a sad story. He was only like 60 or 61. He didn't get to retire, and my heart goes out to his family. He was a wonderful guy, and I loved working with him on night shifts, and it sucked to hear that he passed away, but he was the catalyst for my worst night at the shop. It was nothing to do with him. He hadn't caused anything. He just was the person who kind of kicked things into motion, at least in terms of my response, put it that way. So picture this. It is the Inner Bay Roundhouse on New Year's Eve 2017. We're about to roll over into the next year. I had worked Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then, of course, New Year's Eve because I was the new fresh blood, so therefore I had no right to have any opinions or thoughts or sayings or families or anything, right? And so I was working the overnight shifts until 3 a.m., so I got to see the New Year's start from my shift. And the shift started like any other. We finished second shift off, having been there for most of their shift, other than the briefing, basically. Things went pretty smoothly, had a ton of moves set up for the movers on third. That was kind of really what third shift was about. We would test trains and make sure that the power was outbound ready to go and nobody missed anything. Where could this be going? And as well, our movers would be moving the locomotives around the shop so that everything would be spotted up and ready for the next day. The movers would typically run from our SW that we had. I can't remember if it was a 1500 or a 1200, but it was the 3606. It was neat in that it was set up to be able to jog really easily. And what I mean by that is that you could shut down the prime mover and run just using electric power, battery power. We tried not to run the diesel locomotives inside for everyone's lungs and all that, and for the noise and any kind of health and safety kind of issues. So if we could, we would use jog with the switcher all the way in and out of the roundhouse. Though sometimes when we were moving power that was going upstairs or downstairs, remember the roundhouse was upstairs, the service track was downstairs, and that was kind of inbound, outbound, and all the work was getting done at the roundhouse. When we were going between the two, a lot of times they would end up just running whatever power was good to go, especially if it was on the outbound. And that was the case on this evening. We had the movers moving a slog of units. We had a good day. We'd finished all this power up, even despite it being a holiday. Anyone who was there was getting double time, and they were happy. And so, they put in their time, and we did meals and stuff. It was a holiday. It was a whole special occasion. So everyone was in a pretty good mood. So work was getting done well, and we actually released a surprising amount of engines on a holiday, which was kind of atypical. With that meant that the movers had to build all these different consists to go across the Pacific Northwest. We were the system shop, RAP, Inner Bay as a shop and as a yard. They've apparently thrown in the towel on a lot of it. And so I had a big list for them, right? And so they start doing their moves, and it's third shift. And we kicked off with the briefing, and it was just so easy. And I was still pretty new at the time. I started at the shop in June of 2017, so we're talking, all right, end of the year. It had been, basically 6 months, but still didn't know everybody, and I had been on days for a while, so night shift was still getting used to me. And so during briefing, I was like, all right, so what are we doing at midnight? Like, it's the new year, whatever. And everyone was like, oh, nothing, we don't do anything. And it's like, come on. Everyone on day shift and second shift had already told me the ritual of, everyone climbed in a different locomotive and horns went off at midnight. So I joined my crew in that. They thought that I was, up-and-coming manager person. I wouldn't want to have any fun, but it's me. So I wanted to have some fun. So definitely broke a couple noise ordinances, but it's a new year. You did it briefly, and the fireworks are just as bad anyway, right? So it was fine. Anyway, we enjoyed that, and shortly thereafter, at the start of the year, that's when all things went wrong. The movers were moving locomotives around, and they were using one of these locomotives that was good for power, ready to go, to do so. Why bring the shop switcher all the way downstairs and then bring it back upstairs when you could just run all the released power? And they had like 3 or 4 trains to build. And so they're spotting things in with this one locomotive and putting together trains for Pasco or Spokane or whatever. And they're building the trains, and they'd stop and tie down brakes and whatever and do everything they have to do. And then move to the next spot, build the next one, whatever. And it's maybe 1:30 in the morning, and I hear over the radio, well, hang on, I think this one's going to shut down for low oil. Let's try and get it over to the pad before it does. It's like, everything that they're running is good power. It was all released. It was all finished. It was all fine. What do you mean it's going to shut down for low oil? And I was like, hey, what's the deal with that? Can you guys give me some more info? And they go, well, we're going to get it over to the pad so that it can get filled back up again, but it's tossing low oil alarms and it's going to shut down soon. So we'll try and get it spotted up so that our machinist, RIP, could go take a look at it. And it's like, okay. And then the radio is silent for about 15 seconds or so. And then our dearly departed friend, Dan, who was the machinist on the night, who, this was the catalyst, just chimes in his usual way of, yeah, so what are you going to do about the lake of oil on the rails? I go, what? Lake? You don't just use that word with a spill, like, lightly. It's like, okay, so I ran down there, try and figure it out, and oh my god. Lake was an appropriate term. Everywhere they had stopped with this locomotive, there was so much oil on the ground. Like, I remember in my head vividly the image of, hey, 136-pound rail that's, 8 or 10 inches tall, and the oil is halfway up the web. Like, pooled in this awful thing. Like, we're going to recycle some dinosaurs here or something. And it's just like, oh, this is a problem. That was a really... What happened? How could we do this? What's going on? And all that stuff. Anytime you had a big oil spill or any kind of spill, environmental hazard, something, you had to call the service interruptions desk. Like, hey, I have Sauron, please look at us now, we need your help, that kind of thing. And so I got to do that and talked them through it a little bit, what happened. And they had to send environmental remediation and everything to clean up the ballast and the whole mess that was made. But the whole thing was, what the hell happened here? And like anything on the railroad, it was communication at the end of second shift. During these days, we had a planner supervisor in addition to the floor supervisor. I was the floor supervisor. Planner supervisor was 11 to 11, so he left right after the end of second shift at 10 p.m. And he had been working with one of our pipe fitters talking about this locomotive and got it released and got it finished off. But somehow in the handoff there, probably with it being a holiday, whatever, either between the pipe fitter and the planner or planner and me, we missed the detail of, oh yeah, that locomotive just needs one more thing, but I will sign it off for you so it can get released out of the computer. What was the one more thing? Putting the pipe off of the scavenging oil pump back on. The thing that takes the lube oil out of the crankcase and then pressurizes it and runs it through the strainers before it runs through the main oil pumps back through the engine. The thing right after the giant tank of oil at the bottom of the engine. The main pipe off of that needed to get put back on. I'm kind of shocked that the locomotive ran for as long as it did, spewing all of its engine oil directly out into the ether, filled up the entire car body, and then the car body sump and everything got high enough that it then started running down the overflow drains and everything onto the track. And only then did the hundreds of gallons of oil start to spill out everywhere. Oops. Yeah, a little thing, the key literal main part. That was the last thing that needed done. And somehow that communication didn't happen. I had no idea about it, but I was of course in charge, and it ended up being my fault that this occurred because I was the supervisor. I was the person on duty. Everything came up to me, and I got a fun talking to after that one. But I had to stay a little bit later than 3 explaining the whole situation to the coming in supervisor on the day of. And that was a fun one. And thankfully they handled it quite well, and I didn't have to be like held over for hours upon hours upon hours, and could attempt to go enjoy the last dregs of a New Year's Eve party. But yeah, what are you gonna do about the lake of oil? Just deadpan over the radio. And that was from our machinist Dan. And when I got the message about hearing about him passing away, I mean, it was a bit of a shock. And I'm genuinely sad. He was a wonderful guy, a great guy to work with on third shift, and worked with him for a couple years. Of course, it's been years since, and I haven't talked to him in a while, but he was a good dude. And as soon as I thought of him, that memory came rushing back of, yeah, the lake of oil. And so, yeah, all in all, I think it was something like $60,000 worth of damage to have an environmental company come in, scoop the ballast out, clean up all the mess, and make sure that that was all good. Thankfully, none of it ended up going into the water table. It was all kept kind of in a couple places, and there wasn't any drainage to the all of the ocean that was right around us, basically, right? Yeah, in our bay. But what a mess. And of course, one little simple thing of communication, one little detailed missed, which maybe it was even me that heard something and then didn't process it and whatever, but the locomotive was released, so there it went. And that's why you always dot the I's, cross the T's, the whole 9 yards. But anyway, that ended up being my worst day on the railroad, trying to clean that up. One of my laborers and I, Jeremiah, were like throwing down as many oil mats as we could to try and clean up what we could in the short time, but it's just like, we need more than just a giant roll of pig mats, basically advanced paper towels. It wasn't going to happen. So, what an awful day. And that made for an interesting New Year's, and then got to chat with my bosses the next day, of course. You know, there was no like crazy reprimand or anything, but there was a stern talking to and a PowerPoint that came out of it, and all that fun giant corporate mumbo jumbo. But anyways, guys, that was my worst day on the railroad. It's a bummer. The reason why I'm telling the story now, and my heart goes out to Dan's family. So sorry to hear for your loss, but I enjoyed my time working with them, and that quote will always stick in my head. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this story. As always, thanks so much for watching. I'll catch y'all next time.